The descent from the ridgeline took Martinez nearly 30 minutes as she carefully made her way back down the rocky slope while maintaining constant surveillance for additional threats. The adrenaline that had carried her through the assault was beginning to wear off, and she could feel the physical and mental exhaustion that followed intense combat. Her teammates had maintained their positions in the valley, establishing a defensive perimeter and treating a minor wound that Petty Officer Williams had sustained from rock fragments during the initial enemy fire. As Martinez approached their position, she could see the relief on their faces, but also the professional alertness that would keep them alive if additional enemy forces were in the area. "Ridgeline is clear," she reported as she reached the team's position. "5 enemy Kia, all sniper positions neutralized. But we need to move fast." This was too well coordinated to be an isolated patrol. Lieutenant Commander Roberts was already on the radio, coordinating with headquarters to report the engagement and request immediate extraction. The discovery of detailed American tactical maps in the enemy positions suggested a significant intelligence breach that needed to be reported and analyzed as quickly as possible. "Extraction helicopter is inbound," Roberts informed the team. "ETA 20 minutes to the designated landing zone. We need to move now while we still have the advantage." The team quickly gathered their equipment and prepared to move toward the extraction point, located approximately 2 kilometers from their current position. But Martinez insisted on taking point, as her intimate knowledge of the ridgeline positions would allow her to spot any additional enemy forces that might be moving to reinforce the area. As they moved through the valley toward the extraction point, Martinez couldn't shake the feeling that they were still being watched. The level of preparation the enemy snipers had demonstrated suggested a larger operation, and professional military units rarely operated without backup plans and supporting elements. "Movement, 1,000 meters, northwest," she reported quietly into her radio as she spotted figures moving along a distant ridgeline. Through her rifle scope, she could count at least 6 individuals moving with the deliberate pace of a military patrol approaching their area. "Confirmed," reported Petty Officer Thompson, who had been monitoring the team's rear security. "Additional movement south-southeast, approximately 800 meters. Looks like we stirred up a hornet's nest." The team was now caught between at least 2 enemy elements that appeared to be converging on their position. The extraction helicopter was still 15 minutes out, and reaching the landing zone would require crossing open ground that would expose them to fire from multiple directions. Roberts made the tactical decision that probably saved all their lives. Instead of continuing toward the planned extraction point, he ordered the team to take defensive positions in a cluster of large boulders that provided cover from multiple directions and good fields of fire. "Change of plans," he radioed to the extraction helicopter. "Landing zone is compromised. New coordinates coming up." He quickly transmitted the GPS coordinates of their defensive position, knowing that the helicopter crew would have to improvise a landing in difficult terrain while potentially under enemy fire. Martinez positioned herself where she could observe both approaching enemy elements while her teammates established defensive positions around the rocky area. Through her scope, she could see that the approaching forces were well-armed and moving with the coordination of experienced fighters. "These guys are different from the snipers," she reported. "Larger numbers, heavier weapons, moving like conventional infantry rather than special operations." The distinction was important for tactical planning. While the sniper team had relied on stealth and precision, these approaching forces appeared to be conventional fighters who would use superior numbers and firepower to overwhelm the American position. As the enemy forces continued their approach, Martinez began to engage the most dangerous targets at maximum range. Her first shot eliminated what appeared to be a squad leader from the northwestern element at nearly 400 meters. The precision of the shot caused the entire enemy formation to immediately take cover and begin moving more cautiously. But the return fire was immediate and accurate. The enemy forces were equipped with machine guns and rocket-propelled grenades, weapons that could destroy the rocky cover that was protecting the SEAL team. Worse, the coordinated movement of both enemy elements suggested they were in communication with each other and were planning a coordinated assault from multiple directions. "Helicopter is 2 minutes out," Roberts reported. "But the pilot says the landing zone is going to be hot." We need to suppress those RPG teams before he can get in. Martinez identified 2 enemy fighters carrying rocket-propelled grenade launchers among the approaching forces. These weapons posed the greatest threat both to her team and to the extraction helicopter. Eliminating them became her immediate priority. The first RPG team was positioned behind a small ridge approximately 300 meters away. Martinez waited for them to expose themselves to line up a shot at her team's position, then engaged the gunner with a precise shot that eliminated him before he could fire. But the assistant gunner immediately picked up the weapon and continued the attack. Her second shot eliminated the assistant gunner, but by then, the second RPG team had identified her position and was preparing to fire directly at her location. Martinez had to abandon her carefully prepared shooting position and dive for different cover just as the rocket-propelled grenade exploded against the rocks where she had been positioned moments before. The explosion showered the area with rock fragments and created a cloud of dust and smoke that temporarily obscured visibility across the battlefield. But it also provided Martinez with the concealment she needed to move to a new firing position without being observed by the enemy forces. From her new position, she could see that the enemy assault was being pressed more aggressively. Both enemy elements were now within 200 meters of the American position and were advancing under cover of heavy machine gun fire. The superior numbers and firepower of the attacking forces were beginning to tell, and the defensive position was becoming untenable. Helicopter inbound, 30 seconds. Roberts shouted over the noise of gunfire and explosions. Prepare for immediate extraction under fire. Martinez could hear the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors approaching over the noise of the firefight. But she could also see enemy fighters moving to positions where they would be able to fire on the landing aircraft. The helicopter would be extremely vulnerable during the few minutes required to land and load the SEAL team. Making another split-second tactical decision, Martinez abandoned her defensive position and moved to an exposed location that gave her clear fields of fire toward the enemy positions that threatened the helicopter. It was an extremely dangerous move that exposed her to fire from multiple enemy positions, but it was the only way to provide effective protection for the extraction aircraft. Her rapid and accurate fire forced the enemy fighters to take cover just as the helicopter flared for landing in a small clearing approximately 50 meters from the team's position. The pilot was performing an extremely dangerous landing under fire in terrain that was barely suitable for helicopter operations. But the alternative was leaving the SEAL team to face overwhelming enemy forces. Move, move, move. Roberts shouted as the helicopter touched down. The team began bounding toward the aircraft while Martinez provided covering fire from her exposed position. Enemy rounds were impacting all around her position as she methodically engaged the most dangerous targets among the attacking forces. Her training and experience allowed her to remain calm and focused even while under intense fire from multiple directions. Each shot was carefully aimed and precisely delivered, forcing the enemy to keep their heads down during the critical minutes of the extraction. Petty Officer Williams reached the helicopter first, followed immediately by Thompson and Jackson. Roberts was providing covering fire as they loaded, but Martinez was still in her exposed position, continuing to engage enemy targets that threatened the helicopter. Martinez, let's go. Roberts shouted over the noise of the helicopter and ongoing gunfire. But Martinez could see an enemy fighter with an RPG moving to a position where he would have a clear shot at the helicopter. If she abandoned her position now, the aircraft and everyone in it would be destroyed before they could take off. She acquired the target and fired just as the enemy fighter was raising his weapon to fire at the helicopter. The shot was perfect, eliminating the threat at the critical moment. But the muzzle flash from her rifle immediately drew concentrated fire from the remaining enemy positions. Martinez sprinted toward the helicopter as rounds cracked past her head and impacted the ground around her feet. The aircraft was already beginning to lift off as she reached the door, and Roberts reached down to pull her aboard just as the helicopter rose above the effective range of enemy small arms fire. As the aircraft climbed away from the battlefield, Martinez looked back at the scene of the engagement. She could see enemy fighters moving toward the positions where they had fought their desperate battle, but the immediate threat was over. The combination of superior training, tactical innovation, and calculated risk-taking had allowed them to defeat a numerically superior enemy force and escape a potentially catastrophic tactical situation. Outstanding work, Roberts said over the helicopter's internal communication system. That was some of the finest combat shooting I've ever witnessed. But Martinez was already thinking beyond the immediate tactical success. The level of coordination and preparation demonstrated by the enemy forces suggested a significant threat that extended far beyond the single engagement they had just survived. The detailed intelligence the enemy had possessed about American tactics and likely operating areas indicated a sophisticated enemy capability that would need to be addressed at a much higher level. During the flight back to the forward operating base, Martinez compiled detailed notes about everything she had observed during the engagement. The enemy's tactical capabilities, their equipment, their coordination, and their apparent advanced knowledge of American operations would all be critical intelligence for future operations in the region. The medical evaluation revealed that none of the team members had sustained serious injuries, although everyone showed the effects of the intense physical and psychological stress of the prolonged engagement. But, more importantly, the intelligence gathered during the mission provided crucial insights into enemy capabilities and tactics that would save American lives in future operations. In her formal after-action report, Martinez emphasized that the enemy's greatest strength had also been their greatest weakness. Their confidence in conventional tactics and their adherence to established doctrine had made them predictable when faced with an unconventional response. But she also noted that their level of preparation and tactical sophistication indicated a dangerous enemy capability that should not be underestimated in future engagements. The engagement became a case study in advanced sniper tactics and unconventional problem-solving under extreme pressure. Martinez's willingness to abandon conventional wisdom and take calculated risks had turned a potentially catastrophic situation into a decisive tactical victory. But, more than that, it had demonstrated the importance of adaptability and creative thinking in modern military operations. 6 months later, Martinez was awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action, recognizing her exceptional courage and tactical innovation during the engagement. But, for her, the real victory was that all her teammates had returned home safely, and the intelligence they had gathered had been used to prevent similar threats from endangering other American forces. The enemy sniper team that had seemed unstoppable that morning had been neutralized in 12 minutes by a combination of superior training, innovative tactics, and the kind of calculated courage that defines special operations forces. But Martinez knew that the real lesson of the engagement was not about individual heroism, but about the importance of teamwork, adaptability, and the willingness to take extraordinary risks to protect fellow warriors. Years later, when asked about the engagement that had made her reputation as one of the most skilled snipers in special operations history, Martinez would always emphasize that success had been a team effort. Her assault on the enemy positions had only been possible because of the covering fire and tactical support provided by her teammates, and their survival had depended on everyone performing their duties with exceptional skill under extreme pressure. But, privately, she knew that those 12 minutes on the ridgeline had changed her understanding of what was possible when conventional tactics failed and creative solutions became necessary. The enemy snipers had been defeated not because they lacked skill or courage, but because they had been unable to adapt to an unconventional response that went beyond their tactical expectations and prepared responses. The lesson would stay with her throughout her career and would influence her approach to every subsequent tactical challenge. When facing an apparently impossible situation, the solution often lay not in following established doctrine but in finding creative alternatives that exploited the enemy's assumptions and tactical blind spots. The engagement had lasted less than 7 hours from first contact to final extraction, but its impact on American special operations tactics and training would last for years. Martinez's innovative approach to defeating a superior enemy force became required study for advanced sniper training, and her willingness to take calculated risks to protect her team became a model for leadership under extreme pressure. Most importantly, the engagement demonstrated that even the most skilled and well-prepared enemy forces could be defeated when faced with superior training, innovative thinking, and the kind of courage that places mission accomplishment and teammate safety above personal survival. The enemy snipers who had seemed unstoppable that morning had been neutralized by a warrior who refused to accept that any tactical situation was hopeless as long as creative alternatives remained unexplored. Martinez took 3 deep breaths, centering herself for what she knew would be the most dangerous few minutes of her military career. The plan required perfect timing and absolute commitment. There would be no opportunity to reconsider once she began moving. Covering fire in 10 seconds, she whispered into her radio. Mark your targets on the northwest ridgeline, and do not let up until I call clear. She could hear her teammates adjusting their positions, preparing their rifles for sustained fire. The success of her plan depended on their ability to draw the enemy's attention and keep it focused on their positions while she moved into attack position. 5 seconds, she counted down. 3, 2, 1. Execute. The valley erupted with gunfire as her 4 teammates opened up with everything they had. The sound of multiple rifles firing in rapid succession echoed off the surrounding ridgelines, creating a deafening cacophony that would mask any sound of her movement. More importantly, the muzzle flashes and incoming rounds would force the enemy snipers to take cover and focus their attention on responding to the immediate threat. Martinez sprinted from her position behind the boulder, running in a crouch toward the base of the ridgeline. The covering fire was working exactly as planned. She could see dirt and rock chips flying from the ridgeline where her teammates' rounds were impacting, and there was no return fire from the enemy positions. The run to the base of the ridgeline took 45 seconds across open ground. Every step felt like it took forever, and Martinez expected to feel the impact of a sniper's bullet at any moment. But the covering fire continued to suppress the enemy positions, and she reached the rocky slope without being detected. The climb was even more challenging than she had anticipated. The slope was nearly vertical in places, and loose rock made footing treacherous. Worse, as she climbed higher, she became increasingly exposed to observation from enemy positions. But the continued covering fire from her teammates kept the enemy snipers focused on threats from the valley floor. Halfway up the climb, Martinez heard the distinctive crack of return fire from the enemy positions. They were beginning to respond to her teammates' covering fire, which meant they were focused exactly where she needed them to be. But it also meant time was running out. Soon, they would begin to notice that the covering fire was not achieving any tactical objective, and they would start looking for the real threat. She increased her pace, pulling herself up the rocky slope with her free hand, while keeping her rifle ready with the other. The physical exertion was tremendous, made worse by the heavy combat equipment she was carrying and the thin air at high altitude. But adrenaline and years of intensive training carried her forward. At 70 meters above the valley floor, Martinez reached a narrow ledge that provided both concealment and a clear view of the ridgeline above. Through her rifle scope, she could see the enemy sniper positions for the first time. There were at least 4 active positions, and she could see muzzle flashes as the enemy returned fire toward her teammates' positions. The enemy snipers were well-disciplined and professionally positioned. Each shooting position provided excellent fields of fire toward the valley below while offering protection from return fire. They had clearly spent considerable time preparing their positions and escape routes. But their positions had been designed to dominate the valley floor, not to defend against an attack from their own level on the ridgeline. Martinez identified her first target, a sniper position behind a large rock formation approximately 100 meters to her right along the ridgeline. The enemy marksman was focused on the valley below, periodically rising to fire at her teammates' positions before ducking back behind cover. She waited for him to expose himself for another shot, controlling her breathing and steadying her aim. The angle was difficult, requiring her to shoot across the face of the ridgeline while maintaining her own concealment. The enemy sniper rose to fire, and Martinez took her shot. The round struck the target's center mass, and he immediately collapsed behind his position. The suppressed rifle Martinez was using made very little noise, and the ongoing firefight in the valley below masked what sound there was. The other enemy snipers did not immediately realize one of their team members had been eliminated. One down, she reported quietly into her radio, continuing the assault. Moving carefully along the narrow ledge, Martinez repositioned to engage the second target. This sniper was positioned in a more challenging location, partially concealed behind vegetation and with multiple escape routes available. But his attention was still focused entirely on the valley below, where her teammates continued to provide covering fire. As she moved into position for the second shot, Martinez noticed something that made her blood run cold. There was a fifth enemy position she had not previously identified, and this sniper was beginning to turn his attention away from the valley floor. He was starting to scan the ridgeline itself, apparently sensing that something was not right with the tactical situation. If this sniper spotted her before she could eliminate the immediate threats, her position would be compromised and the entire assault would fail. Worse, her teammates in the valley below would lose their covering fire just when they needed it most, as the enemy would realize the true nature of the American tactical plan. Martinez made a split-second decision that went against all her training. Instead of taking time to set up the perfect shot on her second target, she immediately shifted her rifle toward the scanning sniper. It was a much longer shot, at least 150 meters, and the target was only partially exposed. But it was a shot she had to take immediately. The bullet struck the scanning sniper in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him tumbling behind his position. It was not a killing shot, but it was enough to neutralize him as an immediate threat and prevent him from alerting the other enemy snipers to her presence. Now she had perhaps 30 seconds before the wounded sniper recovered enough to sound an alarm, or before one of the other enemy marksmen noticed that two of their teammates were no longer participating in the firefight. Martinez moved quickly back to her planned position for engaging the second target. This sniper was still focused on the valley, rising periodically to fire at her teammates' positions. Martinez waited for his next exposure, acquired her target, and fired. The shot was perfect, striking the enemy sniper in the head and eliminating him instantly. 2 down, 1 wounded, she reported, moving to final positions. The remaining enemy snipers were beginning to realize something was wrong. The volume of fire from their team had decreased significantly, and they had not been able to achieve any decisive results against the Americans in the valley below. Professional fighters develop an intuition about tactical situations, and these snipers were sensing that the momentum of the engagement was shifting. Martinez could see one of the remaining snipers attempting to use hand signals to communicate with positions that were no longer responding. In a few more seconds, he would realize that his teammates had been eliminated and would begin searching for the threat that had neutralized them. She moved as quickly as possible along the ledge toward the third target's position. This sniper was the most professionally positioned of the group, with excellent cover and multiple escape routes. But he was also the furthest from her current position, requiring her to cross an exposed section of the ridgeline to get within effective range. As she began to cross the exposed area, the wounded sniper from the 5th position managed to raise his rifle and fire a warning shot into the air. The sharp crack echoed across the ridgeline, and immediately all enemy fire from the remaining positions ceased. The warning shot changed everything. Now the surviving enemy snipers knew they were under attack from an unexpected direction, and they would be searching for her position. Martinez was exposed in the middle of the ridgeline with limited cover and enemy snipers actively hunting her. "Contact! Contact!" she heard over her radio as her teammates in the valley came under renewed and more accurate fire. The enemy snipers were now fighting for their survival, and their shots were becoming more desperate and aggressive. Martinez dropped into the best cover she could find, a shallow depression behind a fallen tree. It provided minimal protection, but it was enough to break up her silhouette and make her more difficult to spot from the enemy positions. Through her scope, she could see the third enemy sniper scanning in her direction, searching for the threat that had eliminated his teammates. The range was just over 100 meters, a shot she could make easily under normal circumstances. But these were not normal circumstances. She was lying in an awkward position with limited cover while being actively hunted by skilled enemy marksmen. The shot would have to be perfect, because she would not get a second chance. The enemy sniper exposed himself as he searched for her position, and Martinez took her shot. The round struck him in the chest, and he fell backward behind his cover. She could not confirm the kill from her position, but the target was no longer a threat. 3 down, she reported. 1 wounded, 1 status unknown. But her position was now compromised. The muzzle flash from her shot had been observed, and she could see the remaining enemy snipers adjusting their positions to engage her. Rounds began impacting the ground around her position, forcing her to stay low behind the inadequate cover of the fallen tree. The situation was becoming desperate. She was pinned down on the ridgeline with minimal cover while enemy snipers with superior positions attempted to eliminate her. Her teammates in the valley were also under renewed fire and could not provide effective support at her current location. Martinez realized she had to move immediately or risk being pinned down and eliminated. The nearest cover that would provide protection from the enemy positions was a large boulder formation approximately 30 meters away. Reaching it would require crossing completely open ground while under direct fire from at least 2 enemy positions. "I'm moving to better cover," she reported. "Maintain covering fire." She heard the immediate response from her teammates as they increased their rate of fire toward the known enemy positions. But the enemy snipers were now wise to American tactics and were not being suppressed as effectively as they had been earlier in the engagement. Martinez sprinted toward the boulder formation, running in an irregular pattern to make herself a more difficult target. Rounds cracked past her head and impacted the ground around her feet, but the combination of speed, irregular movement, and her teammates covering fire was enough to get her to cover. Behind the boulder formation, she found an excellent position with clear fields of fire toward the remaining enemy positions and solid protection from return fire. More importantly, the position allowed her to see areas of the ridgeline that had been hidden from her previous location. From this new vantage point, Martinez could see that the wounded sniper was still alive and attempting to set up a shot from a concealed position behind a cluster of rocks. He was moving slowly and appeared to be seriously injured, but he still represented a significant threat to her teammates in the valley below. She also identified the final unwounded enemy sniper, who had repositioned to a location that provided him with an excellent view of her previous position, but left him partially exposed to fire from her current location. Martinez decided to engage the unwounded sniper first, as he represented the more immediate threat. The range was approximately 90 meters, and the target was partially concealed behind rock and vegetation. But enough of his torso was exposed to provide a viable target. She controlled her breathing, acquired a solid sight picture, and fired. The shot was slightly high, striking the enemy sniper in the upper chest rather than center mass. But it was enough to eliminate him as a threat, and she watched him collapse behind his position. "4 down," she reported. 1 wounded sniper remaining. The wounded sniper was the most dangerous of all, because he had nothing left to lose. Wounded enemy fighters often fought with desperate courage that made them extremely dangerous, even when seriously injured. Martinez could see him attempting to move to a position where he could engage either her location or her teammates in the valley below. She tracked his movement through her scope, waiting for a clear shot. The wounded sniper was moving erratically, using what cover was available and clearly understanding that he was being hunted. But his injuries were slowing him down and making his movement predictable. When he finally exposed himself to line up a shot toward the valley below, Martinez was ready. Her final shot of the engagement struck the wounded sniper's center mass, ending the threat that had pinned down her team for over 6 hours. "All enemy snipers neutralized," she reported. "Valley is clear." The sudden silence that followed was almost as startling as the gunfire had been. After hours of constant tension and the life and death struggle on the ridgeline, the absence of hostile fire felt surreal. Martinez remained in position for several minutes, scanning the ridgeline and surrounding area for any additional threats. Professional sniper teams often operated with additional support personnel who might attempt to continue the engagement or coordinate follow-up attacks. But the ridgeline remained quiet. Through her scope, she could see the positions where the enemy snipers had fought their final battle. Each position showed evidence of the professional preparation and tactical skill that had made them such dangerous opponents. Moving to confirm targets and assess the situation, she reported to her team. Maintain security in the valley. The climb to the enemy positions took another 20 minutes as Martinez carefully approached each location to confirm that the threats had been eliminated. What she found confirmed her assessment of the enemy's professional capabilities. Each sniper position had been carefully prepared with excellent fields of fire, multiple escape routes, and pre-positioned supplies including water, ammunition, and medical supplies. The enemy marksmen had been armed with high-quality rifles equipped with advanced optics. Most concerning of all, they had detailed maps of the area marked with likely American approach routes and defensive positions. The level of preparation and intelligence suggested this had not been a chance encounter. The enemy had known American forces would be operating in the area and had prepared specifically to engage them. The tactical sophistication they had demonstrated indicated professional military training and extensive combat experience. But, in the end, their strength had become their weakness. Their confidence in their superior tactical position and their adherence to conventional sniper doctrine had made them predictable. When faced with an unconventional response that went directly against established tactical wisdom, they had been unable to adapt quickly enough to prevent their defeat. As Martinez prepared to return to her team in the valley below, she reflected on the engagement that had just concluded. 12 minutes of close-quarters combat had eliminated a threat that could have pinned down or destroyed her team. But, more than that, it had demonstrated that even the most professional and well-prepared enemy could be defeated by unconventional tactics, superior training, and the willingness to take calculated risks when conventional approaches were insufficient. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of eastern Afghanistan as Chief Petty Officer Sarah Martinez adjusted her scope for the third time in 10 minutes. The SEAL team had been pinned down for nearly 6 hours in what was supposed to be a routine reconnaissance mission. What started as intelligence gathering had quickly turned into a deadly game of cat and mouse with an enemy sniper team that seemed to anticipate their every move. Martinez wiped the sweat from her brow, careful not to disturb her position behind the weathered boulder that provided her only cover. At 28, she had already completed 4 deployments and earned a reputation as one of the most skilled marksmen in her unit. But today felt different. Today, the enemy seemed to be playing by rules she had never encountered before. Contact left, 200 meters, whispered Petty Officer First Class Jackson through the team's communication system. His voice carried the tension that had been building throughout the morning. Movement in the rocks above the valley floor. Martinez slowly shifted her rifle toward the indicated position, scanning through her scope for any sign of the enemy snipers who had been harassing their team since dawn. The rugged landscape provided countless hiding spots, and the enemy was using every advantage the terrain offered. What made this situation particularly dangerous was the precision and coordination of their opponents. These were not amateur fighters. These were skilled marksmen who understood advanced sniper tactics and seemed to know exactly how American Special Operations Forces would respond to their attacks. The team had initially received reports of increased enemy activity in the region 3 days earlier. Intelligence suggested that a high-value target was operating from a compound approximately 5 kilometers from their current position. The mission was straightforward: observe, gather intelligence, and report back on enemy movements and capabilities. No direct engagement was planned unless absolutely necessary for survival. Lieutenant Commander Roberts had briefed the team thoroughly before insertion. The area was known for its challenging terrain and the presence of experienced enemy fighters who had been operating in the region for several years. What the intelligence had not prepared them for was the level of sniper capability they would encounter. The first shot had come without warning just after sunrise. The team was moving through a valley between 2 ridgelines when the distinctive crack of a high-powered rifle echoed off the surrounding rocks. The bullet struck the ground inches from Petty Officer Williams, sending fragments of stone and dirt into the air. The team immediately took cover and began their standard counter-sniper procedures. Standard doctrine called for the team to identify the shooter's position, return suppressive fire, and either eliminate the threat or withdraw to a more defensible position. But, as they attempted to locate the source of the gunfire, a second shot came from a completely different direction. Then, a third from yet another position. The enemy was not operating as a single sniper but as a coordinated team with multiple firing positions already prepared. Martinez had immediately recognized the sophistication of the attack. The enemy snipers were using a technique known as shoot and scoot, firing from one position and then quickly moving to a pre-planned secondary location before return fire could be effective. This required extensive preparation, detailed knowledge of the terrain, and excellent communication between team members. It was not the type of capability typically encountered in this region. "This is not random," Martinez said quietly into her radio. "They knew we were coming." The realization sent a chill through the team. If the enemy had advanced knowledge of their mission, it meant their operational security had been compromised. It also meant the snipers were not simply reacting to their presence, but had prepared specifically for their arrival. As the morning progressed, the enemy demonstrated increasingly sophisticated tactics. They used the sun's position to their advantage, positioning themselves so that any American attempt to return fire would be looking directly into the bright morning light. They coordinated their shots to create confusion about the number of shooters and their positions. Most concerning of all, they seemed to understand American military doctrine and were using that knowledge to predict and counter the team's responses. Lieutenant Commander Roberts attempted to call for air support, but the team's position in the narrow valley made close air support extremely dangerous. The enemy snipers were positioned on the high ground surrounding the valley, and any aircraft approaching the area would be vulnerable to ground fire. Additionally, the proximity of the enemy positions to the American team made precision strikes nearly impossible without risking friendly fire casualties. "We need to move," Roberts said over the radio. "Staying here gives them all the advantages. But movement in daylight across open ground while under observation from multiple sniper positions would be extremely dangerous." The enemy had demonstrated their accuracy and their ability to coordinate fires from multiple positions. Any attempt to move would expose team members to deadly accurate fire from elevated positions. Martinez studied the terrain through her scope, looking for any tactical advantage they could exploit. The valley floor offered minimal cover, with only scattered boulders and low vegetation providing concealment. The ridgelines above were dotted with countless positions that could conceal a sniper, and the enemy had demonstrated their ability to move between these positions without being detected. "I count at least 3 active positions," she reported. "Possibly more. They're using the ridgeline to mask their movement between firing points." The enemy's patience was as concerning as their skill. Professional snipers understood that time was often their greatest weapon. By maintaining pressure without exposing themselves to effective return fire, they could force their opponents to make desperate moves that would create opportunities for decisive shots. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the temperature in the valley began to rise dramatically. The combination of stress, heat, and the constant threat of sniper fire was taking its toll on the team. Water was becoming a concern, as was ammunition. If the standoff continued much longer, the Americans would be forced to attempt a dangerous withdrawal under fire or risk becoming combat ineffective due to heat and dehydration. "Movement, northwest ridgeline," reported Petty Officer Thompson from his position behind a small outcropping of rock. "Single individual, approximately 400 meters." Martinez immediately shifted her rifle toward the indicated position. Through her scope, she could see a figure moving carefully along the ridgeline, staying low and using the terrain to mask his movement. The individual appeared to be carrying a rifle and was moving with the deliberate care of an experienced sniper relocating to a new firing position. "I have eyes on," Martinez said quietly. Taking the shot, she controlled her breathing, allowing her heart rate to slow as she aligned her sight picture. The range was long but well within her capabilities. The target was moving slowly and predictably along what appeared to be a well-used path. She led the target slightly, accounting for his movement and the light crosswind that had developed as the morning air began to heat up. The shot broke clean, and Martinez immediately observed the impact through her scope. The target stumbled but did not fall. Instead, he quickly disappeared behind a large boulder, apparently wounded but still capable of movement. "Hit, but mobile," she reported. "Target is down but not out." Almost immediately, return fire came from 2 different positions. The enemy snipers were covering their wounded teammate, laying down accurate fire that forced the American team deeper into whatever cover they could find. The shots were precisely placed, striking within inches of the team members' positions and demonstrating the enemy's intimate knowledge of their locations. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The enemy now knew the exact position of Martinez's rifle, having observed her muzzle flash when she fired. They would certainly be adjusting their tactics to neutralize what they correctly identified as the primary threat to their operation. "They're closing in," Robert said over the radio. "We need options, and we need them now." Martinez examined their tactical situation with the cold, analytical mind that had made her one of the most effective snipers in the special operations community. The enemy held all the traditional advantages: higher ground, prepared positions, detailed knowledge of the terrain, and numerical superiority. They had also demonstrated patience and discipline that indicated professional training and extensive experience. But advantages could become weaknesses if exploited properly. The enemy's confidence in their superior position might make them predictable. Their use of predetermined firing positions meant those positions could be identified and targeted. Most importantly, their focus on maintaining their tactical advantage might blind them to unconventional responses. "I need covering fire," Martinez said into her radio. "I'm going to try something these guys haven't seen before." She began to carefully examine the terrain features surrounding their position, looking for an approach route that would be unexpected and difficult to observe from the enemy positions on the ridgeline. The conventional wisdom would be to attempt a withdrawal to the rear or to call for additional support. The enemy would be prepared for both of those responses. What they would not expect was an aggressive move directly toward their positions. It would be dangerous to the point of appearing suicidal, which was exactly why it might work. Professional snipers were trained to think tactically and to anticipate rational responses from their opponents. An apparently irrational response might create the confusion and opportunity needed to turn the tactical situation around. The key would be timing, speed, and the element of complete surprise. Martinez would have to move fast enough to reach an advantageous position before the enemy could react, and she would have to do it without being observed during the approach. Most critically, she would have to accomplish this while her teammates provided covering fire that would mask her movement without revealing the true nature of her plan. As she prepared to brief her team on the plan, another shot rang out from the ridgeline. This one struck the rock directly in front of Petty Officer Williams, sending fragments flying and reminding everyone that the enemy was still actively hunting them. The shot placement suggested the enemy was becoming more aggressive and confident in their positions. Time was running out. Soon, the enemy would either coordinate a decisive assault or would bring additional fighters to the area to complete their tactical advantage. Either scenario would be catastrophic for the pinned-down SEAL team. Martinez checked her equipment one final time, ensuring her rifle was properly zeroed and her ammunition was readily accessible. She had 43 rounds remaining, plus her sidearm and combat knife. It would have to be enough. "Listen up," she said quietly into her radio. "I'm going to move to an attack position. On my signal, I need heavy covering fire toward the northwest ridgeline for exactly 60 seconds. Do not stop firing until I call off the fire mission, regardless of what you see or hear." The plan was simple in concept, but extremely difficult in execution. Martinez would use the covering fire to mask her movement as she approached the base of the ridgeline where the enemy snipers were positioned. Once in position, she would have to climb approximately 100 meters up extremely steep and exposed terrain to reach a position where she could engage the enemy snipers from an unexpected angle. The climb would be the most dangerous part of the operation. She would be completely exposed to enemy fire for several minutes, and if her approach was detected, she would have no cover and no escape route. Success would depend entirely on the enemy's attention being focused on the positions where her teammates were providing covering fire. "Understand the risk," Roberts said over the radio. "If this doesn't work, we lose our best shooter, and our situation becomes hopeless." Martinez adjusted her position slightly, preparing for the sprint that would begin her assault on the enemy positions. Through her scope, she could see movement on the ridgeline as the enemy snipers adjusted their positions, and prepared for what they expected would be either an American withdrawal or a desperate attempt to call for support. They were wrong on both counts. What they were about to experience was something completely outside their tactical expectations and their prepared responses. Within the next few minutes, the tactical situation would change dramatically, and the hunters would discover they had become the hunted.